Welcome to class. I'm Trevor, and I post D&D videos every week, generally on Wednesdays. In this video, I want to do two things primarily. I want to make a request, and I want to talk a little bit about my current weekly game that's going on. This is going to be my first game journal style video. I've never done this before. I don't know if my home games are that interesting, but based on something that came up, I have a request for all of you, and I'm hoping you can help me out. So let's jump into it. I'm going to go into my request first, and then I'll double back and talk about what's going on in my game up to this point. Long story short, what I need, if you're willing to help me out, is some ideas for adventuring parties or adventurers that might be participating in the Wild Hunt. Now, if you're not familiar, the Wild Hunt, at least the way it's being run in my game, is essentially interplanar manhunt. And I'll give a very brief version before I go into more depth about where my game is at right now. My players are participating in the Wild Hunt, and the target of the hunt is a satyr named Ogo. Now, in my last game session, they had just gotten into the Feywild. They were speaking to an Eladrin who has been their contact about the Wild Hunt since they heard about it in the first place. And they asked this Eladrin who else was participating in the hunt. And I told them that there were some groups in the material plane and some groups in the Feywild that were participating. So it was not just them. I would love to come up with more characters and players for this game that is going on. But I think it'd be way more fun if I wasn't the only one doing it. I think it's more dynamic if there's more minds at work. And if you have any suggestions for individual players or full parties that are taking place in the Wild Hunt, and like any kind of details or specifics for like what kind of weapons they use, what they look like, anything like that, I would welcome it and I'd love it. So if you have anything that fits into that, drop it in the comments down below. I'd love to throw it in my games and I would appreciate it immensely. Now I'm going to kind of go back and talk about how my players got here and how I'm running the Feywild in my game. Before I jump into the plot, I want to talk about the characters. We have Abershaw, who is a mousefolk cavalier fighter, and he comes from a mousefolk enclave. This community is very, very tight-knit. They share stories and legends and lore, and Abershaw wants to be an adventurer. He wants to be an adventurer and bring back his trophies and treasures and stories and share them with his mousefolk enclave. And it is such a gift to a DM to have a character like this, because almost any plot hook I throw at Abershaw, he's going to want to explore. And there's just something so pure about his character. It's a ton of fun. The second character in the campaign is Fascia. Vasia is a College of Spirits bard who is a changeling. Vasya did not fit into her group, which is this kind of traveling circus group or style of performers, but she didn't fit into this, her original kind of family, and she was cast out and started to have to find her own way. She was a vagabond. She'd obviously used the fact that she was a changeling to pickpocket and steal and make her way in whatever way she could, and eventually that led to telling fortunes, and that's kind of where her bardic magic comes from. And the last character is Edgar. Edgar is an elderly man. He is an evocation wizard, but he's not actually. Well, I mean, he is actually an evocation wizard. He is not actually an elderly man. Edgar was a younger, college-aged character who he was essentially cursed by his former mentor. He found out that his mentor was experimenting on individuals and manipulating their time and then using that to live for longer. And Edgar wasn't okay with this, but Edgar was cursed. And actually the first arc that we did of this campaign was Edgar finding out this information and kind of gathering these memories and dealing with his former mentor. And now, kind of more in the background, but now Edgar is trying to get that time back and potentially see if there's a way for him to become young again. That brings us to where we are in the campaign and why my players are in the Feywild in the first place. So after the situation with Edgar's backstory, they came across that Eladrin, and that Eladrin told them about the Wild Hunt and told them that Oko, who is the target for the hunt, did not know that he was the target for the hunt. As a matter of fact, Oko thought that he was just coming to prepare the hunt, to kind of sow chaos on the material plane and make things more fun for the denizens of the Feywild. But in reality, Oko is actually the target of the hunt because he was getting a bit too close with Queen Titania, and Oberon was not okay with it. So he finds out that he is the target of the hunt, and my players find out this as well. And Oko's response to this is to essentially try to merge the material and Feywild planes together. Now, to be clear, Oko doesn't know what this will do. I mean, no one, Titania and Oberon don't know what this would do. No one on the material plane, at least my players have interacted with so far, know exactly what this will do. But everyone understands that whatever it is, it'll be bad. Because in the best case scenario, the Feywild and the material plane become one place, and that's not good for the people in either location. So he got these MacGuffins, essentially, these planar anchors that he's putting in both the Feywild and in the material plane and locking these planes together and kind of drawing them together. And that is the current most active threat that's going on with the Wild Hunt going on kind of underneath it or simultaneously. This is Oko's response to being the target of the Wild Hunt. My players found the first planar anchor in the material plane. There are 2 in the material plane and 2 in the Feywild. And they found the first one. It was guarded by a green dragon, and they talked with the dragon and kind of half fought, half persuaded the dragon. It was a really interesting and dynamic combat encounter. And they got that planar anchor and they brought it back into the Feywild to be dealt with. They didn't know the best way to handle it themselves. They just knew that it was very dangerous, and they didn't want to leave it anywhere on the material plane so Oko could get his hands on it again. So they brought it back into the Feywild. This kind of goes into how I'm running the Feywild. At least this area of the Feywild that they've been in is it's an elvish city or elvish kind of royal community, elvish and Eladrin to be more specific. And I'm running this very much kind of Alice in Wonderland style. It is very alien, and there's a lot of naturalistic imagery and just a lot of uncomfortable to people of the material plane natural magics that are going on everywhere around them. They get into the Feywild and they're essentially inside of a blossom or a flower, and they're speaking to a dryad that is like the leaves of the walls all around them. And they learn the rules of the Feywild, which are the normal rules of the Feywild: don't eat, don't dance, don't lie, don't say thank you, things like that. And then the petals all peel away and a floating leaf comes up, and that is their escort to the next location. And then they go to a room that can kind of almost room of requirement style take them wherever they want to go in this particular locale. And I think the funny thing is, I think that leaf is actually an item that's coming up in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. I don't know when this video will go live. It'll either be just before or just after my review of that book. I don't have a copy of Wild Beyond the Witchlight yet, but I'm super stoked to get it. And that leaf is kind of this mode of transportation. My big goal in this Feywild situation is trying to get it to feel alien and different, and not just like the material plane, but with a different color filter on it or something like that. I want it to feel like a different experience altogether. So my players, they met with Titania and Oberon. They actually met the Wild Hunt. So an individual who is the embodiment of the hunt and was the last hunt's victor. And he is currently trying to find the planar anchors on the Feywild side. He actually has already found one of them, and he's going to find the other one. And it was during this conversation one of my players asked who the other participants were, which is where the request came from at the beginning of this video. And my players have decided that while they're in the Feywild, instead of just doubling back and jumping back to the material plane, they are going to travel to the next location in the Feywild and then jump back across to the material plane. And part of this was, like, I'm glad they did this, right? Because this way it gives me the opportunity to be able to add Feywild encounters, both combat and non-combat, in this kind of arc of the journey that are fun and flavorful and different. Up to this point, this campaign has had a lot of overland travel, and doing more overland travel in the material plane could have easily bogged the campaign down. As a matter of fact, that brings up another, I guess, second request here, and that is, if you have any ideas for Feywild encounters, and they don't need to be combat encounters, but just anything my players could come across in the Fey, please drop it in the comments down below. I'd love to throw those things in the game, and I think they'd be a lot of fun. I'm hoping that some elements of the carnival I'll be able to add to this game, and they might come across that while they're traveling to their next location, but just anything you can think of, I'd love to throw it in there. That's really this video. It's a campaign diary, which I've never done before, and I hope my campaign sounds at least somewhat interesting, but primarily it's a request. If you have any kind of ideas for characters that you want me to incorporate to make up those other parties that are taking place in the Wild Hunt, please include them in the comments down below. Or just anything Feywild that you want me to throw in to surprise and intrigue my players. I'd love to hear it. But if this kind of video is interesting, whether the direct request thing or just the campaign journal, I play in a game on Mondays and I DM a game on Fridays. If you want to hear more about that, let me know in the comments down below. Normally I focus more on tips and homebrew and not on this kind of stuff. but I'd be happy to do more of it if there's interest in it. I appreciate it, and it means the world if you add a comment, like, subscribe, or anything like that. And as I always say, be safe. Make smart life choices.